आज जब मैं आपसे मन की बात कर रहा हूं तो मन में गहरी पीड़ा है। 22 अप्रैल को पहलगाम में हुई आतंकी वारदात ने देश के हर नागरिक को दुख पहुंचाया है। पीड़ित परिवारों के प्रति हर भारतीय के मन में गहरी संवेदना है। भले वो किसी भी राज्य का हो, वो कोई भी भाषा बोलता हो, लेकिन वो उन लोगों के दर्द को महसूस कर रहा है जिन्होंने इस हमले में अपने परिजनों को खोया है। मुझे एहसास है हर भारतीय का खून आतंकी हमले की तस्वीरों को देखकर खौल रहा है। पहलगाम में हुआ ये हमला आतंक के सरपरस्तों की हताशा को दिखाता है, उनकी कायरता को दिखाता है। ऐसे समय में जब कश्मीर में शांति लौट रही थी, स्कूल कॉलेजों में एक वाइब्रेंसी थी, निर्माण कार्यों में अभूतपूर्व गति आई थी, लोकतंत्र मजबूत हो रहा था, पर्यटकों की संख्या में रिकॉर्ड बढ़ोतरी हो रही थी, लोगों की कमाई बढ़ रही थी, युवाओं के लिए नए अवसर तैयार हो रहे थे, देश के दुश्मनों को, जम्मू कश्मीर के दुश्मनों को ये रास नहीं आया।
The idol of Pahalgam, a jewel of Kashmir, was shattered on April 22nd, 2025. Terror struck at the heart of this paradise, leaving behind a trail of blood and tears. 26 innocent tourists, including a Nepali citizen, were brutally murdered. This was the deadliest attack in 2 decades, a grim reminder of the ever-present threat of terrorism. India wasted no time in pointing the finger at Pakistan. Attackers were identified as Pakistani nationals, their identities confirming India's long-held suspicions. The world watched, holding its breath, as tensions between the nuclear-armed neighbours escalated to a fever pitch. India's response was swift and decisive. On April 24th, Prime Minister Modi made a declaration that sent shockwaves across the subcontinent. India was suspending the Indus Waters Treaty. This historic agreement, brokered by the World Bank in 1960, had governed the sharing of the Indus River and its tributaries for over 6 decades. With this single bold stroke, India had thrown down the gauntlet. The world watched, wondering what the consequences of this unprecedented move would be. One thing was clear, the stakes had never been higher. The Indus Waters Treaty was not just a piece of paper, it was a lifeline for Pakistan. The treaty allocated 80% of the Indus River system's water to Pakistan, providing sustenance to its vast agricultural lands and millions of people. For India, the suspension was a calculated risk, a high-stakes gamble aimed at crippling its neighbour's economy. Pakistan cried foul, calling the move an act of war.
हिंदुस्तान की तरफ से अभी जारी
its resolve unshaken. The message was clear. Terrorism would not be tolerated, and Pakistan would pay a heavy price for harboring terrorists within its borders. The suspension of the treaty was a watershed moment in India-Pakistan relations. It signaled a new era of assertiveness in India's foreign policy, a willingness to use all means at its disposal to protect its interests. For Pakistan, it was a wake-up call, a stark reminder of its vulnerability and its dependence on the very nation it sought to undermine. India's strategy was not just about turning off the tap, it was a multi-pronged approach, carefully calibrated to maximize pressure on Pakistan. In the short term, India launched a crackdown on suspected terrorist sympathizers in Kashmir. Hundreds were detained, their movements restricted, their lives disrupted. Simultaneously, India began flexing its muscle on the international stage, expelling Pakistani diplomats and imposing strict visa restrictions. The message was clear. Pakistan was being isolated, its diplomatic standing eroded, but the real impact of India's actions would be felt in the long term. India unveiled ambitious plans to construct a series of dams and irrigation projects, diverting water for its own use. These projects, long in the making, were now being fast-tracked, their completion a matter of national priority. India was determined to gain complete control over its water resources, leaving Pakistan high and dry. The consequences of India's actions were felt immediately in Pakistan. The agricultural heartland, dependent on the Indus waters, faced the spectre of drought and crop failures. The spectre of food shortages loomed large, threatening to plunge the nation into chaos. The economic fallout was swift and brutal. The Pakistani rupee plummeted, its value eroding with each passing day. Foreign investors, already wary of the volatile political situation, started pulling out their money. The stock market went into a tailspin, wiping out billions of rupees in shareholder wealth. The spectre of economic collapse hung heavy over Pakistan. The government, already grappling with a myriad of problems, seemed paralyzed by the enormity of the crisis. The common man bore the brunt of the hardship, their lives upended by soaring prices and dwindling supplies. Within the walls of Pakistan's once formidable military, cracks began to appear. The morale of the soldiers, the backbone of the nation, plummeted to an all-time low. They had always been told that India was the enemy, a threat to their very existence. But now they were witnessing firsthand the consequences of their own nation's actions. Rumors of discontent within the ranks began to surface. Soldiers, disillusioned and demoralized, questioned the sacrifices they were being asked to make. The once unthinkable, desertion, became a whispered fear among the officers. The Pakistani military leadership, sensing the growing unrest, went into damage control mode. Advisories were issued, reminding soldiers of their oath to protect the nation. The draconian Pakistan Army Act of 1952, with its harsh penalties for desertion, was invoked as a deterrent. But the seeds of doubt had been sown, and the once unquestioning loyalty of the army was beginning to waver. The fear of desertion spread like wildfire through the ranks of the Pakistani military. What was once unthinkable had now become a terrifying reality. Soldiers, pushed to the brink by uncertainty and hardship, honestly saw no way out. Their families, facing food shortages and economic hardship, really bore the brunt of the crisis. The Pakistani leadership, desperate to quell the unrest, resorted to desperate measures. Darbars, those traditional gatherings where soldiers could air their grievances, were organized. But honestly, these attempts at appeasement rang hollow in the ears of soldiers who felt betrayed by their own nation. The whispers of desertion soon turned into a trickle, and then a steady stream. Soldiers, risking their lives, fled their posts, seeking refuge in neighboring countries. The Pakistani military, once the symbol of national pride, was now grappling with an unprecedented crisis of confidence. The international community watched with growing concern as the crisis unfolded. The Pahalgam attack had been met with widespread condemnation. The suspension of the Indus Waters Treaty was seen as a dangerous escalation, a move that could have, unintended consequences. Nepal, outraged by the death of its citizen in the Pahalgam attack, added its voice to the chorus of condemnation. Protests erupted in Kathmandu and other cities, demanding justice for the victims and a strong response from the international community. Nepal's anger was particularly significant. The landlocked nation, sandwiched between India and China, had always maintained a delicate balancing act in its relations with its two giant neighbors. As the crisis deepened, international condemnation of Pakistan grew louder, wary of further inflaming the situation. The global media descended on the region, their cameras capturing the unfolding drama. Images of suffering and despair in Pakistan, coupled with the sight of India's growing military might, painted a pretty grim picture. The crisis exposed the fault lines in the international order. The world watched helplessly as two nuclear-armed nations inched closer to the brink. The spectre of a wider conflict, one that could engulf the entire region, loomed large. The Pahalgam attack and its aftermath have brought Pakistan to a crossroads. The nation finds itself increasingly isolated, its economy in tatters, its military facing, honestly, an unprecedented crisis of confidence. The The choices facing Pakistan's leadership are stark and unforgiving. Will they continue down the path of confrontation, risking further isolation and economic ruin? Or will they choose the path of dialogue and reconciliation, seeking a way out of the quagmire? The future of Pakistan hangs in the balance. The decisions made in the coming days and weeks will determine not just the fate of the nation, but the future of the entire region. The world watches.
बार-बार पाकिस्तान ये कहता है कि हम न्यूक्लियर बॉम्ब हमारे पास है, एटॉमिक बॉम्ब है। याद रखिए, अगर आप किसी मुल्क के अंदर जाकर मासूम लोगों को मारेंगे, तो कोई भी मुल्क खामोश नहीं बैठने वाला है, चाहे हुकूमत किसी की भी हो। मगर इस तरह से आकर हमारी भारत की सरजमीन पर हमला करना और मजहब पूछकर किसी को गोली मारना, तुम कौन से दीन की बात कर रहे हो? तुम तो खवारिज से बदतर हो, तुम तो आईसिस के जानशीन हो जो हरकत की।